Hello, my name is Kristina, and on behalf of the authors, I will present our paper, Towards a Contemplative Research Framework for Self-Observation in HCI, a study of compassion cultivation. To begin with, I would like to acknowledge the lineage of wisdom and contemplative knowledge traditions that we are part of. I pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, their connection to land, sea, and community, and their elders past, present, and future. I'm currently on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I further acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on the country on which you are on, and pay respect to their elders past, present, and future. I hope that our work can contribute to the contemporary embrace of ancient systems of wisdom and care for self and environment. We are in a compassion crisis, so it's no surprise in their article, Grand Challenges for HCI Researchers, Schneiderman and colleagues highlighted the need for technologies amplifying empathy, compassion, and care. Also in science literature, Przembal and Singer note that systematic in-depth research on how it qualitatively feels to engage in different kinds of contemplative practice is still missing. The story of this project began in early 2020, just as we were entering into our first lockdown due to COVID-19. My research approach for my thesis pivoted towards first-person methods so that I could continue to carry out research with imposed government restrictions. Our study started with the premise that there is increasing research interest in HCI in mind-body contemplative or cultivation practices, yet authentic descriptions of first-person lived experience informing design are few. I carried out a self-observation of Tonglen, a Buddhist meditation technique for compassion cultivation that was carried out over 12 weeks. Part of the motivation for this project was also to foreground the first-person lived experience of the researcher. And as you can read in the quote written by Francisco Varela, lived experience is where we start from and where we must come back to, like a guiding thread. The aim of our study was to articulate the subjective experience and go deeper and closer to singular experiences of the development of compassion within oneself. We argue that this type of research can provide an authentic understanding of compassion and its cultivation, along with a richer, more nuanced basis to use for more meaningful design. Our contribution to HCI and design research is 1. An in-depth account of our study and the development of our methodology to self-observe a contemplative practice, in this case, compassion. We discussed the potential for researchers to train in developing the clarity of self-observation and ability to more accurately express and communicate their lived experience and embodied knowledge. We propose a framework for training self-observation that is applied to observing the unfolding process of a contemplative practice. And in doing so, we document and reveal the nuances and richness within abstract experiential qualities of an embodied understanding of multidimensional and non-linear processes. Like Varela, we were inspired by well-established Buddhist techniques for mind training. We posit that most HCI researchers are not trained in observing the mind. However, the notion of attunement is more commonly used in somatic body-based practices, where the practitioner trains their sensitivity and awareness within the environment through directed attention of bodily sensing, feeling, and moving. HCI researchers have been exploring approaches that make the researcher visible and different forms of observing and describing reality through first-person accounts, taking the form of autoethnography or autobiographical design. Examples of suitable contexts of this approach may be, but are not limited to, personal, domestic, or intimate contexts, such as sleep, menstrual cycles, or intimate relationships. Our case study is positioned at the intersection of Buddhist philosophy, contemplative science, and first-person research for design in HCI. The daily practice that we conducted and observed consisted of 3 parts. First, stabilizing attention. Next, observing the mind. Then observing the embodied practice, and finally documenting this process. Our self-observation protocol includes sampling the process of the daily practice using somatic snapshots at 3 points. The documentation protocol includes written and visual documentation of reflective observation within 30 minutes immediately after the conclusion of the practice. The data was collected in the form of written journal entries, audio recordings of verbalizations of the experience, and body maps. Our analysis focused on the processual structures that comprises the unfolding phenomenon. Our aim here is to uncover the key cognitive and somatic processes taking place within the practice over time. The final set of thematic processes and sub-processes was iteratively developed, resulting in a map. We arrived at 5 key thematic processes within cultivating compassion: accepting, dissolving, discovering, realigning, and transforming. The sub-processes are further dissected through phenomenological reduction into descriptive categories that are supported and illustrated by the subjective experience of the researcher. When reflecting on and analyzing first-person data, the researcher becomes aware of mental processes that are often expressed through metaphor, and the documentation of this can be a valuable resource for others in the field. Our proposed framework accounts for the gradual familiarization with the phenomenon being studied. In this case, the researcher's lived experience of practicing Tonglen for compassion cultivation. The preliminary cognitive activities serve to sharpen the researcher's lens of attention and awareness, followed by an enhanced capacity for directing this lens to observing the contemplative practice under investigation. Over time and repeated practice, a meta-awareness is developed and refined. Our research also proposes visual ways of documenting the lived experience. Our study resonates with the shift in HCI away from the quantified self towards a new design space for non-instrumental designs applying first-person practices that access the inner self. Our contemplative research approach shares the same commitment to paying attention to the inner self and cognitive processes that are felt as shifts in the body, yet is distinguished by deliberate training of the ability to pay attention to the workings of the mind. Our paper uses compassion cultivation as an example of an unfolding process occurring within each session over time. The contemplative approach has been used by the researcher to understand from an embodied perspective how to observe with precision the practice from within. The approach we present helps to develop an authentic expression of the processes and sub-processes, as well as a richer visual language of the elements comprising of the internal practices. Thank you for listening, and I welcome any questions about our work.